Again, welcome to the event today. We'll be talking about cybersecurity, and we are in a Zoom meeting mode, which means you have access to a chat box below to submit questions for our two guests. We will record this session. We are actually recording it already, and we'll post it on our YouTube channel. And as a follow-up, we will send you the content that you'll see today in a presentation, and we will also ask kindly for your feedback. We know this is a newer format and we're all trying to get better, so we appreciate you telling us how we can do that. So we can get started. I'm really excited to welcome both Natalie and Krista today. And I think maybe a little bit of the explanation for why we have the event today, cybersecurity. And the spirit of what we're trying to do with the programming for the chapter. Scott is on the board, he knows this well. Selwyn is running the Ventura County chapter. Is we're trying to be relevant to our alumni and provide some value added content and opportunities to connect with each other in this environment. And we recognize the environment is changing for everybody. And Krista was mentioning as we were warming up here, hackers are very, very creative marketers. And with the increase in people working remotely, there's potential for more opportunities for hackers to connect with the organizations in various ways, do some damage. And we want to understand what can we do to protect ourselves? What can we do to protect ourselves financially, as well as measures we can take today, practical operations and information technology measures we can take today to reduce the severity and impact of these events. So Natalie and I connected as part of Association for Corporate Growth, San Diego, a couple of months ago. By the way, it's a great organization that might have a chapter where you are if you're not in San Diego. And we started talking about how we try to reach out to the community and be helpful. And she mentioned some of these challenges that she sees some clients of hers going through. And we thought, okay, how about we bring this content to the UCLA Anderson alumni? And she said, but wait, there's more. I can bring somebody else. I can bring a technology expert. And that's how Krista got connected. And so we talked a few times about what might be a good flow, how might we be able to convey this content. And that's how we got to where we are today. So we have some materials that we have prepared. We're not going to have a structured presentation necessarily, but we want to be engaged with you as well. And I think to warm us up, maybe I can start with some questions to our guests, just so that you understand who they are and what kind of organizations and services they provide to their clients. And then we can get started with the actual content. Does that sound good? Nod the head. Okay, awesome. Okay. So with that, Natalie, maybe I'll turn to you first. And you work for Cavignac and Associates, and I am hoping I'm pronouncing the name correctly. Tell us a little bit more about your team and your experience there.
Absolutely. Well, thank you so much for having me. I am not a UCLA alum, but the founder of our firm is. He was very excited to hear that I was going to be joining in on this call. So a little bit about me. I have been in the insurance industry about 14 years. I was sort of born into it with my experience. I have, my father is a broker and my uncle owned an agency and his 4 sons are brokers and my sister is an underwriter and 2 of my cousins are underwriters. So it's super exciting discussions around Thanksgiving dinner table, as you can imagine. But so I just sort of grew up hearing the different ways that you can help organizations. So the first part of my career I spent at Liberty Mutual. And so I spent a lot of time just learning the technical aspects of insurance. So I was an underwriter for 6 years. And then following that, I was on in our relationship management role before I turned over to be a broker myself. So when I made that decision, I was able to have the opportunity to talk to a number of brokers in San Diego. I'd worked with many of them and really align with Cavignac and what we do here. So our approach with risk management is really full service. When we engage with a client, the insurance piece of it, while obviously important, and how we get paid is usually step 3 or 4 of our process. So we really strive to understand the business and the risks that they're involved with, and educate the business on some of the risks they might not realize that they have, and then work within our own internal teams. We have internal safety, internal HR that we deploy to our clients to help them better their processes and procedures. And then we go to that risk insurance piece of it. So we've been here almost 30 years. We're the second largest privately owned agency in San Diego, and I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Thank you. And you work with other professionals outside your company, and that's how you got connected with Krista. Tell us a little more how you work with somebody like Krista, who's a cybersecurity expert.
Yeah, I think that for me to be successful in my role is to think outside of the insurance policy and really think about how to help and provide value to clients. And sometimes that's completely out of the risk elements, whether it be someone that needs, banking or investment or whatever it might be, marketing help. But specifically with Krista and her company, cybersecurity is so important, and cyber insurance is relatively new in the insurance industry. It's been around about 15 years. Okay. And so when we talk about these services that we provide, we have, like I said, safety and HR that have sort of been cemented in these processes for 30 years. I, really need to rely on someone like Krista to be able to provide more insight to clients that is, above the technical knowledge that I have and our firm has in that. So I really like to reach out to companies that can support what we're trying to do for our clients.
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you. And thank you for connecting us with Krista also. And so Krista, when Natalie told me that you'd like to bring an expert, I looked you up, and you work for a managed services security solution company. Mm-hmm. Tell us a little more, please. What does that mean?
Okay. So the name of the company I work for is called Consilien, and we started in 2001, just right after 9/11 happened. One of our principal founders was working for a Fortune 100 organization, and they had their home office on the East Coast, and he was here stationed on the West Coast and in charge of business continuity. So when 9/11 happened, when the tragedy happened, everything went dark on the East Coast because they were near ground zero, and operations failed over by the book according to their incident response plan and their business continuity planning over to the West Coast. And he was in charge of that. So he and the other 2 partners got together and decided that at that time, there wasn't anything for small and mid-market businesses that would devastate a business. They wouldn't be able to continue with operations. So we started bringing business continuity, backup disaster recovery solutions, and consulting down market. So that's been about 19 years ago. And the company's evolved. So we did provide outsourced managed IT services, and we've evolved more deeply into the security. So basically what an MSSP does, managed security services provider, what we do is exactly that. We help to guide organizations on what technologies, what policies and procedures they should be implementing, good governance, and support their internal IT team with security. So one of the things that I see a lot is that the IT professionals in-house are really overwhelmed with not only having to manage the day-to-day, all the day-to-day tasks that they need, with help desk, you're having problems with your email. Now they're tasked with privacy issues like CCPA and having to protect the company, and then all the security stuff. So we help them with that. We can bring in, like I said, the technologies and the governance.
Got it.
Yeah. And
Okay.
so I've been with them for about 5 years now.
Okay, so I think we can see both of you have the expertise. These are some of the challenges that you go to work to solve for your clients, and I think this will be a good setup for a rich discussion. And I know you'll stick around for the networking. People can connect with you directly in the networking. We'll make sure to send your contact information as well as a follow-up if somebody wants to engage with you and has additional questions also. So thank you for being here today. And Natalie, I'll turn it over to you. Maybe you can help us get started a little bit with categorizing a little bit the type of issues related to cybersecurity and maybe some of the policies that are available out there, or some of the examples of the claims that you see coming your way?
Yeah, absolutely. So I thought that I would just kind of give an overview in very general terms of the types of cyber risks that are out there that you could potentially be exposed to in ways, and then some examples like Olivia said on some actual claims. So as I mentioned, this is an insurance world, a relatively new form of coverage. And the reason why that's so important to understand is there's no standard cyber form. And it took me some time to really kind of grasp how the magnitude of that. You know, if you talk to an insurance broker and you talk about general liability, you can pick up a policy and really quickly pick out things that are unique to that policy and maybe detrimental to a company. With cyber policy and cyber insurance, that's really not the case yet because there's no standard form. So not only do you have companies offering completely different coverages, but you have companies offering them in completely different terms as well. So it's just really important. I think it's always important to understand your insurance policy, but for me, with where we are right now, I think that cyber is extremely important. So I want to talk just about the sort of the 3 areas of risk within cyber. So you've got what everybody thinks about, third-party risk. So third-party liability. So as an organization, you have third-party liability that protects you or the insured against allegations of damages owed due to the release of a third-party personally identifiable information. So your target breach, right? Your healthcare breaches. So the healthcare systems have millions and millions of pieces of what we call PPI. If that gets out there and a third party is damaged or is owed damages, that's where your third party liability comes in. I think that's what most people think about with regards to cyber and where the costs are involved. You're going to have costs to monitor credit. You're going to have costs to, again, if there's any damage, I'm sorry, monitoring credit wouldn't be in that one, but you know, if someone was to take that information and rack up a credit card, that's where those damages are going to come in. But I don't think a lot of people, sorry, go ahead.
No, I said, okay, I see the category there.
Yeah. I think what a lot of people don't realize is the costs associated with the first party liability, our first party coverages, which is going to cover your costs as a business for all the costs associated with that risk. So yes, sorry, PII, not PPI, personally identifiable information. So once a breach occurs or there is allegations of a breach, the first thing that you have to do is forensics. And there's costs associated with forensics. And actually, the costs associated with forensics is typically the most expensive costs associated with this because there's a lot, as Krista can tell you, there's a lot of man hours that have to go into finding these breaches. Sometimes these breaches occurred almost years, year to years before the actual loss occurs. So you have to be able to go back, find where it occurs, find out how many pieces of information were corrupted. And then again, like I mentioned, you're going to have to notify all of these individuals. And then there's also legal costs associated if you are sued and you have to defend your company. There's regulatory fines, as Krista mentioned, CCPA, very big in California right now. And then business interruption. So let's say you own a business and either your system is hacked or you have a ransomware attack, which we're seeing more frequently now. If your system is locked up for 3 days and you're a manufacturer, you've just not been able to fill orders. And there's a business interruption piece associated with that. Even if you can get back up and running, but you've lost your 3 months of backup because you thought it was backed up. Krista and I, again, have had this conversation. You thought it was backed up until it wasn't, and you can't complete, you're offline for that time. So there's just a lot of costs associated that are going to be on the shoulders of the business owners that I think it's really important to understand.
And is that an example of, because this is not a standard form, an example of something that you would want to look out for specifically if you're buying a cyber insurance policy to make sure it's included in there, that business continuity or business disruption?
Absolutely. And then even going further into that, you have to think about business interruption and then dependent business interruption. Are you depending on somebody else to store your data? So if you have a cloud provider and they are hacked, does your cyber policy cover business interruption losses if somebody else is hacked?
Okay. Okay, so these are things to look out for, at least to know that you might be exposed and you need some sort of protection. And we're talking about financial protection, and we'll talk with Krista about steps you can take to mitigate those risks today even.
Correct, absolutely.
So can I jump in real quick? So I'm just curious if these companies have been in the news a lot in the last couple of years, the ransomware things.
Yeah.
So there was just one a few weeks ago. And if somebody has, I'm sure the insurance varies, but if somebody has an insurance policy, do they cover the payment if you pay the ransom payment, or are they expecting you to fight them, or what how does that work?
No, they add, yeah. So that's actually one of the added benefits to cyber policies. I would say more so than other policies is the level of expertise you get in the event of these claims. So a typical claim, a general liability claim or a professional liability claim, you get great expertise from the claims handling process. But with cyber, again, depending on the policy, you also get breach coaches. You get ransomware negotiators. So the first thing that you do when that breach happens is you reach out to that, and each policy is different, but you might have a breach coach and they handle it from there. So you walk away. So, it becomes a negotiation with them on what makes the most sense. They do, every claim is different, but they definitely will pay it. One of the claims I was just going to mention recently, and I just wanted to write it down so that I had all the numbers right. So it was, I think it was an $800,000 ransomware request. They got it down to 600, but 600,000 was paid. 225,000 on top of that for forensics, 75,000 for data restoration. So all of that data that they had to recreate. And then it took them 5 weeks to get back online. And that was a manufacturer. So that had a business interruption. So, and it's interesting because you mentioned ransomware is in the news a lot, and it is, and cyber insurance is still really cheap compared to what you get. So I'm very curious, and I think insurers are in sort of a tough situation right now because, they don't want to pay out $600,000, especially when when the premium on a policy might be 5 or 6. But hackers know that they've got, a lot more people have policies now. So it's kind of turning into a little dance. But at the end of the day, if you've got the coverage, whether they pay the ransom for you or not, you're protected. Wording of a policy makes a difference to make sure that it's, that they're going to pay it and not just reimburse you, because you don't want to have to come out with $600,000 to get reimbursed. But that gets down to the nitty gritty of it. But yeah, the ransomware is what I'd say ransomware, and then that third aspect of what I'll talk about, that cyber crime, which ransomware, in my opinion, ransomware should fit into that, but it doesn't within cyber policies. Cybercrime is more of that phishing and social engineering. I'd say those are the most common, especially in what I deal with. I don't deal with a lot of healthcare. My clients aren't in healthcare. So there's not as much of that personal information. But so that cybercrime, that third aspect of cyber is, are you tricked into letting money go? Because at its intent, a cyber policy was created to protect data. It was never created to protect money, but it's evolved over the years. And so now some policies will have additional coverage if your employee is tricked into paying an invoice. There's typically a supplement on that if it's there, but you want to look for that. And what we're also seeing lately is actually it's called invoice manipulation. So let's say we're an insurance broker. Let's say I'm a manufacturer, and my client, I manufacture toys, and my client is Target. If my system is hacked and an invoice goes to Target, and Target pays that to a fraudulent, let's say it's a $100,000 invoice they pay to this bad actor, who's on the hook for that? Is it me because I let my system get hacked? Is it Target because they didn't have the controls in place? But Target's not going to pay me $100,000. My system got hacked. So it becomes this battle. And so we're seeing a lot more of that as well.
And is that where the policy would step in and say, okay, rather than you duking it out with Target, we'll provide the coverage?
Yeah, so that's almost always sublimated, because they want Target to take some ownership of, hey, you've got to have proper controls in place. Simply pick up the phone and verify that this is the right wire. But so there can be warranties on the policy, there can be sublimits, there could be no coverage. But I think that's why it's really important to, and what I try to work with my clients is to understand, what's your concern? Why do you want cyber? Is it for the crime part of it? Okay, well then let's focus here. Is it for the data? Let's focus here. And let's just understand the limitations of the policy. Because obviously if you increase some of those crime coverages and you get the more preferential wording, you're gonna pay a little bit more. To some people that's worth it, to others it's not. But my big piece, and I sometimes probably will talk people to death on it, but I just think business owners have to understand, and then they make the choice. There's no right answer, but I just think specifically with this, I'm a little bit of a geek about how the coverage form can just make such a difference.
Got it. Okay. I know you even have some claims example. Let's park those for now.
Yeah.
In the interest of time. I know we started a little bit late. And we're going to switch a little bit to Krista. And Krista, I think you can control the slides too if you want. But tell us a little bit how, at a high level, an IT professional can start thinking about mitigating some of these risks. What are some of the things that they could do today?
Well, one of the things is really is education. I think we take it for granted that our employees know what a phishing email looks like. Actually, before I started, I had a message from the CEO of the company, because one of our customers, they have a franchise, one of the franchisees clicked on a link to unsubscribe from a newsletter, which we all do. And then the email was breached. So he downloaded something. And so we're in the process of remediating that. So I think it's really important to have an education program for everyone, especially since people are at home working. And being at home has created this kind of relaxed environment, right? Where before, when you're in the office, there's more structure in place with your IT department. So when you're at home, there are certain things that we want you to do, like doing your updates, updating your computer. Hopefully you're not sharing your personal computer. You're not mixing business and pleasure on your computer. I know your kids, if your kids are at home or your grandkids are over, they may want to play games. We really don't want them to do that on your business laptop. So maybe you can separate that out. There are, so we talked about, I have my little list here of things that you want to do. And if you contact me, I can give you this list on what to do in the office and what to do at home. There's some really good tips. You want to make sure that your laptop is backed up if you're working from home, you know, and it's not just the backup, but the restore. So like what Natalie was talking about with the manufacturer, we had a customer, this was a few years ago, where their chemist clicked on something and downloaded ransomware. And we were able to remediate that and have them up and running in just a matter of hours, because we have a system in place that helps to restore the entire business. So in the case of Natalie's customer, as an example, or the example that she was giving, they probably had the backups, but they didn't have the applications, the operating system. They didn't have the kinds of things in place that they could do a restore and get back to business. So you even want to think about those things when you're at home. If something happens to the computer, where is my data and can I restore, and how quickly can I get back to work? So those are some things you want to think of. Have paid for antivirus and anti-malware. So don't download anything that says it's free antivirus. It's not free, you're always paying for something. So, you know, if you're at home, have paid antivirus. If you can, have your IT department separate your network so that you have your family on one network in the home and then you're on a different network while you're at home. So those are just some of the things that you can do right now. And I just want to mention that, you know, it's very likely that someone you know, or even yourself, you're going to have a cyber incident. What you want to do is just like leaving your home, you want to make sure that your doors and windows are locked. You just don't want to leave. You don't want to be, because a lot of cybercrime is a crime of opportunity. So, you know, the hackers are looking for open windows and open doors so they can come into your network and get into your business. So if you're doing a pretty good job of making sure that some of the most essential things are locked down, you're going to help to mitigate your risk quite a bit. So anyway, so those are some of the real quick tips for everyone that I hope you can take home today and get your antivirus and anti-malware.
And Krista, thank you. You mentioned hackers are very good marketers, and there's a little bit more behind what a cybercrime organization operates like. Can you have us catch a glimpse of what organized crime is structured like in order to make this complex task happen, right? It's not easy to breach something like Twitter or
you would think that Twitter did have a hack, right? So they were able to get into President Obama's Twitter account and do a big Bitcoin scan not that long ago. So, but yeah, so I can't share my screen, but if you
want me to share it here?
Yeah, if you want to share it. This is really interesting. More myth busting here.
Hold on 1 second.
Yeah. So the majority, when we look at the latest studies on cyber attacks, you're going to notice that the studies say about 70% of attacks come from external threats, which means 30% are internal. That's another story. So 70% of the attacks come from outside, and about 56% of those attacks are organized crime. So when Natalie was talking about you have a negotiator, a professional negotiator working with you, they're negotiating with the customer service person within the organization, within the organized crime. So this was from one of the big cyber conferences where a company was on the dark web and they were actually able to map out the structure of what an organized crime syndicate looks like. So you have the president, you have the CEO, you know, the CTO, you have the customer service, you're the customer, you're the victim. In fact, there was I believe it was UC San Francisco, and I'm not 100% sure, that was recently hacked, and the BBC was able to go on the dark web. I don't know how they did this, but they were able to go on the dark web and monitor the interaction between the organized crime syndicate and the negotiator that was working with them, because they thought that, well, you're a $4 billion organization, we want you to pay $10 million or whatever it was, and they were able to negotiate them down. But the interaction between the two, it was chilling, you know, because they are hardened criminals. This is what they do. And he, you know, the person on the other end said, well, if you don't pay us, we're going to take all your student information and we're going to put it up on a website. How much would you pay for that? So there's an extortion level now to the ransomware, where the ransomware would lock you out. Now, because they can be in the system for, on average, like 200 days, they can start to scrape the data. So we're seeing that organizations now want to pay because the cyber criminal has the PII as an example. But yeah, so they're very well organized. I mean, this is a business. This is what they do all day. You know, they have a marketing department, and the marketing department is sending, you know, emails from, you know, from MailChimp to you, and you don't, you know, and you unsubscribe, and then they got you. So they're very clever, very motivated. It's big business.
And there's a whole marketplace where they can go to monetize some of these digital assets that they come across, right?
Yeah, so the dark web is one of my most favorite things to talk about. It's very interesting to think about the dark web. So when you're online searching for a webinar, you're on the surface web, which is just a small part of what the World Wide Web is. The biggest part is called the deep web. So for example, I'm talking to my CPA today, and he says, well, you know, we're going to put you on a portal. So you don't have to go over the open internet anymore to send information, because it's not as secure. Now you can go into this portal that no one can see, and it's much more secure. So it's those kinds of things that are on the deep web. When you're getting into your financial records, your medical records, you know, maybe getting into the school organization you get in through the deep web. You can't find it if you Google it, right? Getting into your banking, those kinds of things.
Can you explain
Yeah.
how that is separated off? Because ultimately they are using network resources. I mean, it's part of the internet, right? It's not a VPN, or is it?
You know what, that's a good question. And I'm not sure if I would call it a VPN. You're not over the open web. So that's really what they're talking about. So the open web is where I can Google you, but I can't, Scott, Google your banking information. So yes.
Yeah, but isn't part of the reason for that just because the banks have, as do we, have like security protections on it? In other words, not only HTTPS, you know, secure hypertext, but also, you know, double, whatever it's called, double authentication, things like that. Is it that, or is it that it's physically separated off onto separate servers?
Oh, you know what? That's a good question. I'm not sure. I'll have to find out for you, but I can get that information, and then I can follow up with you.
Because it seems like, and maybe this is just what the media does to us all. I never know. Since you guys are experts, I'll just ask the question.
Sure.
The media makes it out to sound like anybody that wanted to get you or anybody else, if they tried hard enough, they could get anything, whether it's CIA files or whether it's bank files or brokerage files or anything, they could get it if they really wanted it. Just a question of how hard they dig.
Yeah.
Now, maybe that's not true, but you're making it sound like something's actually separated off to where that's not the case.
Well, what we're saying is that because you're on the surface web, you're exposed. So I can,
yeah, got it.
Right? So if you VPN in, then you're being encrypted. Then I can't really find you, follow you around on the web if you VPN in. Interestingly enough, Scott, if you were to download malware and you VPN in, you can infect your network. So from that reasoning, it does sound like everything is connected. Even on the dark web, you're using servers, but those servers, you know, the information bounces off the servers in such a way that it's very difficult to trace the information. So with the deep web, one of the ways in which you can protect yourself is having like MFA, right? Having multi-factor authentication. You definitely want to do that. So let's say someone gets my banking credentials. If I don't have MFA, enabled, they can get into they can certainly get my financial information. So I guess your point is we are connected. And if someone really tries hard enough, of course they can get your information. They can, there's SIM card stealing. I mean, there's all kinds of ways that hackers are trying to get your information. And so, like I said, for the average person, we want to make sure that we're doing the right kinds of things. But with the dark web, going back to Olivia's question, the dark web is a marketplace where you're not traced. So originally, you can go on there if you're a political dissident and you can get information. You can find the BBC, you can go to ProPublica, you can read things. So not everything that happens on the dark web is nefarious necessarily. But because it's so hard to be traced and tracked on it, then it does give rise to criminal activity. So if I steal if I'm the hacker and I get your information, I'm going to sell it on the dark web, and I can sell it at a very reasonable price. So then going back to our example of even being, in the deep web, I have your Office 365 credentials. I can get into if you don't have MFA, I could very easily get into your email, and it happens a lot. So anyways, I hope that helps.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
So the dark web is something that for most of us is a little bit kind of, otherworldly or something like that. So
Sure.
how does one get into the dark web? I mean, there's not a Google dark web browser for the dark web.
Actually, you need what's called the Onion router, and it's a special piece of software that if you Googled it, you could probably find Onion router software, and that's how they get in. So it is a marketplace. So when you're on the dark web, it's just like, being on Amazon. You can look for all kinds of things while you're there. So it's just that if you're doing something illegal, I can't trace your IP address. It would be very, very difficult. I had someone ask me, well, what about law enforcement? Because people do get in trouble. So the downside for the criminal is you don't know who you're talking to. You could be talking to a federal agent and you wouldn't know it. So there is a certain amount of risk that everybody takes when they go on the dark web. But yeah, you need something called the Onion router, and then there's another software, but TOR is the most popular one.
And Krista, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but that's an area within your company that you can, not acting criminally, but can get on the dark web to see what your client's information is already out there. I mean, that's a great resource, right?
Yeah, we can scan the dark web for company credentials. And we do that, and you find quite a bit actually. So LinkedIn had a breach in 2016. Not everybody is aware of it. So if they're still using the same password, then somebody has your information. And a friend of mine was hacked quite a bit, and we did a dark web scan for her. She has a social media company. And she thought that she was really locked down, but they got into an application that she was using on her WordPress site. The password that she used for that application is one that she used for Sam's Club and some other things. And these people got a hold of it, and they were ordering champagne and all kinds of stuff, And the only reason why she found out was because she received an email. But it's those kinds of things that we can find on the dark web for. And I'd be happy to do it for free for anybody that wants to do that today. We can search for company credentials on the dark web, see what's out there.
Thank you.
Is
Thank you
there
for
any
offering that.
is there any truth to Macs versus PC and relative security? Is that still a thing?
Yeah, that's a really good question. No. It used to be that this idea that Mac was more secure than PC, but the reality is today there's special malware for Mac. I mean, there's now at some of these security conferences that we go to. With the security conferences, there's like a whole day dedicated to how to hack, how to protect Mac. So you still want to have some of the same protocols, do your updates. When updates come, you want to make sure that you're doing your updates. You want to have paid antivirus on there as well. But no, it's not any safer anymore today.
That means that I can't just tell myself that if I do it on my iPhone, it's safe.
I think phones are typically, so let's say you go to Starbucks or you're out somewhere and you want to get online. You don't want to use the public Wi-Fi. You can use your hotspot actually on your phone, and you're going to be much more secure than you would otherwise if you can't use a VPN. So the thing I like about Apple is that when you download the apps, all the developers have to go through this very rigorous process before their application is allowed in the App Store. With the Android, that's not necessarily the case. So it's really, you're downloading things at your own risk, because the onus is really on you and then on the developer to do the right thing. So if they're nefarious or they just have, bad code that's easily hacked, or they're doing something, then you have more risk there or more exposure.
Krista,
If somebody's just a small business person or just a solopreneur just by themselves, and they work sometimes at home, sometimes in an office setting, but they want to protect themselves. You mentioned, antivirus, anti-malware, that kind of thing. I mean, are we just talking like WebRoot, Malwarebytes, or are we talking about something more sophisticated?
No, you can do, WebRoot, any of the big ones, Symantec, any of the big name ones. It's just that sometimes people want to do the free one, the freebies, and you're just not going to be as secure. But if you have it paid for, even with your backup, look into, there's other backup. What is it? Carbonite, as an example. We don't use Carbonite because we use enterprise grade, but Carbonite, I know that you can do backup with Carbonite, and you can even pay where they have a hard drive. So if something happens to your computer, your data is on the hard drive, they'll ship it to you and you can put it up on another laptop. So you're creating some business continuity there. But there are a lot of resources for small business and entrepreneurs.
And is like McAfee as good as all the others, or is there one of those kind of primary ones that you think is better than the other ones?
I really don't have. I mean, I would just do some research to see what you think works best for you. Yeah.
I would also add that don't look past simple things that Krista mentioned earlier, training and changing your password. Chubb is a carrier that has been in the cyberspace for quite a long time, and they have, settled over thousands of claims. And from their underwriting perspective, those are the two biggest issues, is that people aren't trained, so staff isn't trained, and so they don't know not to click on things, or they don't know what to look for, and you don't change your password enough. And so we all know how annoying it is to change our password. So a lot of us don't do it. I mean, I know I've been guilty of that in the past too, but there's apps, there's an app for that. There are apps that will create random passwords that are just, 14 characters that are who knows what, but it connects to your system and puts that app in there, and it makes it more difficult for culprits to get in. And so I would not look past that. And those are not expensive.
Yeah, the password managers for sure. So then that way you can have a different password for everything that you utilize, and you don't have to memorize it, but have multi-factor authentication even on your password manager, because those can also be hacked. So if you have MFA, then that's just another layer of protection for you, but absolutely.
So you're talking about not a single thing, but a multitude of things, and maybe even all these 18 things together. They're not absolutely 100% bulletproof, but they might make the difference between you having the metaphorical door or window open and somebody just walking into your network versus them finding an easier target somewhere else because you've taken some or all of these measures, right?
Yeah, so when we think about security, we think about what's called defense in depth, which is exactly what you're talking about. It's a layered approach. So it's people, process, and technology. So educating your people, we call it the human firewall. You know, even your kids at home, you know, now that we're working at home, educating them on the kinds of dangers that they can run into. And then we get into the process. What kind of processes do you have in place? So we talked about 30% of hacks are from internal. You know, there are people, you know, disgruntled employees. Sometimes we would think about pre-COVID. I know we live in this post-COVID world, but pre-COVID, where, you know, you might walk them out and, you know, make sure clean out their desk, but are you removing them from the system? So sometimes when we do a data and network security assessment, we'll find that there are, you know, people still in the system that haven't logged in 18 months. They haven't worked there for that long, but they still have access into your network. So, and then when you think about the technology and then different things you can do, you know, like being at, you know, the antivirus, you know, getting the MFA, those kinds of things. So
the hackers have a multitude of ways to get creative and try to breach in. And that's why we need multiple defenses to close those gaps, right?
And also to Natalie's point earlier about understanding what your risk is. So if you're in the medical field, then your risk is much higher than someone that, say, is selling, you know, cupcakes. You know, the cupcake seller may still have some consumer data, but certainly, you know, the medical establishment, they're going to have HIPAA rules, they're going to have CCPA rules. There's going to be people actively looking for all of that information. They are a rich target, so their risk is higher. And it's higher if they're shut down, right? If they're an emergency medical center or something.
Sure.
And so their risk is very high compared to the cupcake makers. So I think talking to someone like Natalie and really walking through what your risk is a very intelligent conversation to have. And here's another thing. There's a study that says the more technology you have, actually, the less secure you are. And the reason that is because people are like, well, I just need this, I need this, I need this, I need this. And they're not thinking about it holistically. And so then they just assume the technology is taking care of everything and there's gaps. So you really do want to approach it from a risk mitigation standpoint. What is my risk and how am I best going to mitigate that risk?
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, Krista, thank you. That was, and I know there's much more underneath the surface, but I think that gives us an idea of how to think about protective measures and strategies we can take today. And Natalie, maybe we turn it over to you. I know we're running a little bit longer on the prepared content, but this is still important. And just help us think about the financial decision.
Yeah, and I don't want
versus cost of breaches, how to think about that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to get too deep into it because I don't know how many are involved with this sort of conversation, but I would just say that in the insurance industry, the cyber policies are very affordable compared to the coverage granted. So most cyber, and just quickly, there's a couple of different ways to get the policy. One is just an endorsement onto your general liability or property policy. I would probably avoid those. I look at those as not really having coverage.
Okay.
It's not going to offer, most of them don't offer that business interruption, a lot of the additional features, which I think are extremely important. They're typically more geared towards that third-party liability. But so for instance, I've got a company that's 56 million in sales, and they take a lot of credit card information, and their cyber policy just renewed at $8,000 for a million in limits and $1 million in defense limits. So I mean, to put that into perspective, that's also, again, including the breach coaches. A lot of these companies have resources, so they have that password app available through them. They have training to deploy. So it's actually a really interesting policy because it includes a lot more resources than most of them. Now that's a pretty large organization, or, you know, middle market, but I mean, small businesses, I would say, you know, it's not unheard of to get a very robust policy for less than $2,500 annually.
Oh, wow. Okay. And how long does it take to put one in place? Let's say I decide to do it today. I call you up. Is it, hey, in 1 week you can have it done, or there's a lot more underwriting that goes into it?
No, surprisingly, there's not a lot of underwriting that goes into it. There's some questions that they ask. Again, it's something I don't know how long is going to last at this price point. I would say if you came to me, we would have a little more of a holistic conversation. But yeah, it's not difficult to get into place.
Got it. Okay. Well, thank you both. We have time for some questions from the audience as well. And by the way, for the networking portion, I don't know if we even need to break into separate rooms. We can probably continue the conversation here. And let's just see Nathan or Austin or John or Trinell, Tito. Any questions about what we covered so far or how you might want to proceed from now on in regards to cybersecurity risk? Okay. Well, we're good. We covered it all. Very clear. So thank you both. As we promised, we will send the deck with some of these details and contact information. And I think if you are interested in networking a little bit, catching up, sharing a little bit where you are, who you are, if there are certain professionals you want to connect with, or anything related to the school that you want to chat about, we can stick around for a little bit longer, and we would ask that you just unmute yourself so that we can all collaborate a little bit.
Yeah, and if anybody does want the dark web, you just let Olivia know, and I'd be happy to check that out for you.
Access to the dark web or searching on
searching the dark web, not
okay,
access.
I mean, that's a different conversation, probably.
Yeah, it's a conversation we need to have offline.
Offline, yeah, not while it's being recorded.
Thank you, guys.
Well, thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for inviting me. This was fun. It's wonderful.
As a side note, I have to say it's been interesting hearing about Zoom bombing